When the topic of tests and grades come up in the homeschool world, a lot of us just kind of shut down and we just don't say what's really in our mind and how we really feel about it. Listen, I've been like that too. I will kind of say here or there my thoughts and our approach, but have kind of held back a bit until today. So I'm going to share with you why we chose, now you know exactly where we landed on this, but why we chose not to give tests or grades to our homeschoolers to have graduated. The last one is in his final year of homeschool. And at the end, I'm going to wrap it up with some encouragement and some questions for you to think about when you're making this decision. And then also, I'm going to share with you what I did instead. I hope that it encourages you, helps you to think a little bit outside the box, because guess what? You are home educating your children, and you get to make up the rules. Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where we talk anything and everything homeschool and all that encompasses the homeschool lifestyle. I'm your host, Leigh Nguyen. I'm a mom who never intended to homeschool, and suddenly I am here, 14 years later, with 2 homeschool graduates and 1 more to go. No matter where you are in your homeschool journey, Little by Little Homeschool seeks to empower and encourage you to carry out this amazing calling of home educating and discipling your children. It's not always easy, but I'm here to walk alongside you because I promise that these years are worth all of your effort. Grab that load of laundry that needs folded, settle in at the kitchen sink to wash those dishes, or tie up those walking sneakers, and let's get into today's topic. If you have been throwing around the idea of attending Little by Little Homeschool Conference, I want to encourage you to get your tickets soon. Ticket sales are going to close on October 8th for the October 18th conference. And so that is just 2.5 weeks away. You can get your ticket at littlebylittlehomeschool.com/conference, or go ahead and just click on the link in the show notes. Cannot wait to see you there, but don't delay. Don't miss that deadline. Now, let's start talking today about why I chose not to give tests or grades to my homeschoolers and what I did instead. But let's first lay some framework. It's really important for us to have definitions to some of the words that we're going to use today, because we can't be on the same page if we are using a different definition for a word. So let's start with the word test. Today I'm going to be talking about 2 kinds of tests. And so when I say that I did not give tests, I'm going to provide some clarification and a little bit more information in a little bit. But when I say I didn't give tests, I did not give subject tests. So an example, science tests, history tests, math tests. So it wasn't just content subjects, it was also skill subjects. So there weren't tests in that, even if the curriculum that we used had tests in them. And I will explain what we did instead in just a minute. So that's what I mean by tests, is specifically subject tests. And we will get into in just a moment, there's also standardized tests. And so I feel like I'm saying, it's like a tongue twister here. So standardized tests are going to be those ones, which if you were in school, you remember there was a couple of days or a week or so when you had to go in and just take some tests, fill in all those little bubbles. Remember that? With the pencil, and you get all the directions, and you had the sheet. You know, if you erase, make sure you erase fully. So that would be standardized tests. Okay, so subject and standardized. Now let's talk about what I'm saying. When I say the word grade, what do I mean? So I am talking about attaching letters or numbers to a particular subject. Subjects such as, again, math, arithmetic, English, your language arts. You could break that down into vocabulary and spelling and all those, but history and science. So grades, when it is associated with either a letter like an A, B, C, D, F, or numbers, and apparently they've changed the numbers. And so in some schools, A's are a lot wider than they used to be. I remember in school, when we were younger, until high school, it was like 90 to 100 was an A. But then when you got to high school, it was like 93 to 100 was an A. So it was a smaller number range to be able to get an A. So when I'm talking about grades, I mean letter or numbers associated with a particular subject. I'm not talking about grade level, which would be grade level, whether you want to say grade level 1, grade level 2, or you want to say first grade, second grade. So that's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about grades. What I'm going to share with you today is what I have done in 2 states that we have homeschooled in. These are both known for being pretty strict with their homeschool regulations, and it has worked for us. Let me add this caveat, though. You need to know your own state regulations. Even if you live in the same state as I did, or you lived in the previous state that I did, you are the one that is responsible for your homeschool education and the legal part of that. I am not, so don't come to me for legal advice. There's a lot of great legal advice out there, but when it comes down to it, the buck has to stop and start right there at you. This has been my experience in two different states, and homeschooling kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, graduating to, and now going into the final homeschooler that I have. And this is our final homeschool year. So you have to know your homeschool regulations and what you are required to do, as well as what you feel comfortable with. Let's go back now. Now that we have definitions and I've kind of given you that disclaimer right there, let's go back and talk about subject versus standardized tests. Okay, so subjects, again, are going to be you take a test for history. Maybe you do a certain unit of your history curriculum, and then at the end of that, there is a test for you to do. And then depending upon how many answers you get correct, you get a grade for that. Now, the standardized tests are the ones that are overall. Now, I have lived in two different states that we have homeschooled in, and we have been required to perform standardized tests. And at the very end here, I'm going to share with you my approach to that and how it has really worked and really helped my kids to formulate an opinion about home education and just education in general. So let me ask you a question when it comes to the standardized tests. Who's standard? Well, the standard is, I haven't done all the research, but it's the government, it's the Department of Education, it's maybe the people who come up with the test. And in my state, students have to receive a certain level in order to show that they aren't failing. And that's all that they necessarily need to do, but they also need to show that they aren't backsliding. You can't have a high level and then consistently, maybe over years or even 1 year, show that there's been a big backslide. So there's a little bit of ambiguity right there with that. But in the very initial part of it, there is a certain level that they have to have as well. And that level is not difficult for most children. Now, you might have a child that has some learning disabilities, and I would assume that the school district will work with you on that and that kind of stuff. So this is just a child that does not have any severe learning disabilities or anything like that, no type of instructional plan, nothing that's special or different about their ability to learn. So there is a level, and it's not hard for them to achieve that if you are home educating your children. If you are not, they don't know how to read, don't know how to do math, then yes, it's going to be very difficult for them to do that. So just know that the bar is pretty low, and most kids can way exceed that. Now let me go back to that question of whose standard is it? And when we home educate, we get to choose the standard. We get to choose the measuring pole that we use for our children. And a lot of these standards, I think, are outdated. If you did not listen to episode 394, I encourage you to do so. I will link it in the show notes. It's just talking about the fact that the school system is outdated, and they rely so heavily upon tests and grades in order to move the child along to the next level. And our homeschools can easily fall into that trap. So episode 394 is all about the school system being outdated and some questions for you to ask and to figure out if your homeschool is outdated as well. Now let's get into the grades. In school, grades, you probably remember this as well. It's just kind of like a game to play. It's an easier game for some kids, harder game for other kids. And the results of playing this game, of having this certain level, we can't have to get A's and B's, whether that pressure comes upon yourself or that pressure comes from parents or from other kids. And there's this comparison. It adds stress. It adds anxiety. And again, that comparison. And so when we're talking about giving our children grades, I want you to ask yourself, if you want to add that stress, that anxiety, and that comparison to your kids. And I will hear it a lot from parents who are not required to do standardized testing, not required to do subject testing. And they say, well, I just want to know where my child is. Okay, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. If we are heavily involved in their home education, we should know where they are at. Now, I understand sometimes, let's just give an example. There are math curriculums that they might do online. And so there's a lesson, and then they have like a little test or quiz or something, and it shows you the percentage that they get right or wrong. And so that computer is not able to actually sit down and look at what is right and what is wrong. If you had them do some type of math program that is on paper, you can easily see that. I opted, except for 1 year when I tried for half of the year to do an online math program, I opted to just do it on paper. And I would do the lesson. Now, okay, during the high school years, they did Nicole, the math lady, and she would do the lesson, and then they would do their math work, and then I would evaluate and check over their math work. So you would say, okay, no matter what the grade is, the grade level, let's say, when they did their math work for that day, did a lesson, or maybe it was just a review day, they did that work, I would look it over. And so here's the thing. My daughter was very stressed in public school. We pulled her after second grade because there just was so much stress about it. And one thing that really triggered her was having a red marker with an X. That really upset her. It hurt her feelings. She took it very personally if she got something wrong on whether it was homework or just work that she did during school or whether it was actually a test. And it just really, really affected her. And she just was very sensitive. And so I was like, okay, we are not going to do any red X's. And so from the very first day of our homeschooling all the way through, I am in my 15th year, I have done the same thing for every one of my kids, for every subject, every year. And so these are for things that maybe they would fill out, whether it's a worksheet or a math work. So say in the math work, problem number 9 was done incorrectly. I would use a color marker, anything but red. I never used red. And I would just circle the number 9, that the number 9 problem was wrong. And I would simply circle that. It'd be in pink, it'd be in blue, it'd be in purple or orange to let them know there's something wrong with this. You didn't get to the right answer. The conclusion is not correct. But then I would take it a step further. And instead of just saying, oh, this is wrong, this one is wrong, I would mark somewhere in the problem. So say it was a long division. There would be no reason. Say the very final subtraction that they did was wrong. Say the remainder was wrong. Instead of having them redo the entire problem, causing more possibly drama, more heartache and headache, why not just go to the part that was wrong and correct from that point on? So I would mark somewhere in there, wherever it was. And so this required a little more effort on my part, but it was 100% worth it. Because how many times did you get frustrated in school? And how many times did you get frustrated if you had to do an entire long division problem to find out that you simply subtracted 5 minus 3 and you accidentally wrote down 1, but you meant it to be 2? Or you really did get it wrong. Why not just go back and correct that? So that's how I approached that when it came to that. And so when they would do maybe some work, I didn't then count up, say there was 10 problems to do, and they got 1 wrong. And so everyone was worth maybe 10 points. Okay, you got a 90%. I didn't go and write 90% on top of it. I just simply marked which one was wrong by circling it and then making a notation where the problem went wrong. Maybe it was history and I had them fill out just a worksheet because in Pennsylvania, when we lived there, we had to turn in portfolio and sometimes I needed proof that we did some things. I'd be like, all right, fill out some of these worksheets so that we have something to show the evaluator that we can turn in. And so maybe it was like a fill in the blank and there was 3 different things to fill in the blank and only one of them was wrong. Maybe it was geography and they had to list 3 different cities. And so they listed 2 out of the 3 were correct. And I would just simply circle the 3rd one that was not correct. And all they had to do is go back and fill that one in, figure out what the correct answer was for it. And so I didn't give grades. The goal was mastery and understanding and building upon knowledge, not having a certain letter or number attached to a subject to say, oh, I'm so bad at math because I only ever get C's or I get 70% to 75% all the time in math, so I must not be good at math. No, we're just kind of struggling in this area. So let's figure out how we can then increase your knowledge and help you to get better at it. Now, let's talk about when it comes to grades and high school level and filling out transcripts, because I know people kind of freak out about this. In my state of New York, I do have to attach a grade to each subject in the high school years when I send in our quarterly reports. I'm not going to give too many details here, but I just want to say that if we are looking for mastery and knowledge, shouldn't our kids be A students? Shouldn't they excel? Because we slow down when we need to, and we can speed up when we don't need to, and they can move on. And so by the slowing down, instead of looking at it and saying, so say they're in algebra and there's one concept, they just can't quite get it. Well, let's not move on to the next one. Let's slow down. Let's find some other ways of being able to really cement and confirm in their mind how to do these certain processes. So I have alluded a little bit to what I have done, but I want to tie it up right now in a nice little bow. And then I want to leave you with some parting thoughts for you to really think so that you can make a decision that is best for your homeschool and your family. So what did I do? We simply skipped all the subject tests in all the grades, kindergarten through 12th grade. Does that mean we would always skip? Maybe, let's say in the math, there would possibly be maybe every 5 lessons a test. And it said test on top of that. Did we skip it? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes I just use it as a review. Simply, I didn't have to do a lesson that day, and I would maybe mark down some of the math programs that we did would have maybe 30 problems on that. And that would probably have taken them, depending upon the level and the skill that the child had, it would maybe take them sometimes an hour. It's there was no reason to do that. I would just kind of pick out some. I knew where they were struggling and maybe where we needed to confirm that they had mastered certain parts of it. And so I would mark down which ones to do, or I would simply say, you know what, we're going to have 2 days of review. Do problems 1 to 15 today, and tomorrow you can do 16 to 30. And I just skipped putting grades on it. Again, if part of it was wrong, then let's fix it. And then let's move on with life. So I would often use those as a review if we wanted to, but I didn't attach a letter or number grade to it in any of the levels, elementary, middle, or high school. And so my kids did not get letter or number grades officially to them in elementary and middle school. Again, in high school, I had to, and they should be working towards mastery, but it was never something that an individual review or something. It was in our quarterly reports, I had to give them a grade for how they were doing in those couple of months in that quarter of a homeschool year. Now let's go a little bit broader and let's talk about standardized tests. Going back to, I mentioned earlier, I don't know if I quite finished and completed that thought that some parents are in states that are not required to do it, but yet they still do the standardized testing to check to see where their kids are at. But to me, honestly, I get it. I can say that I do get it, and maybe it's easier for me to say because I'm required to do this, but I have looked over the tests for all of these years. I probably just maybe not the first year, but from then on, I have almost always had kids that have had to do some type of standardized test because of the grade levels that they landed in and the states that we were living in. And so I've looked over all of these tests, and I don't see anything great or magical about them. Instead, why don't you look at what you have done for that year and look back and say, okay, did we achieve our goals? Did we work towards that vision that we have? And did I see forward movement, some progress in things? Because there can be things in the standardized test that you're like, oh, okay. I mean, and sometimes it's so basic. I'm going to tell you right now, the test that my kids have done in the high school years, I'm just like, really? This is all that's required for, say, 11th grade? This is the level of math that they need? And my kids had such higher level math, and sometimes like, oh, okay, I just have to do some long division? That's it? So again, the standard isn't what I'm measuring my kids against, and I think that it is a waste of time. To be honest, it kind of is. But when you live in a state you have to do it, you have to do it. So when it came to the standardized tests, I would say to my kids, because I mean, I've done this for all kinds of years. You know, I would have a 9-year-old that I have to do it, and now I have an 18-year-old, well, almost 18. By the time he takes it again, he'll be 18. And I would just say to them, listen, this is what we have to do in order to homeschool, and we're just going to do it. But I expect you to put forth your best effort to do the best that you can, because we do the best that we can at everything for the glory of God. He has called us to do our best. And so I don't want you to be sloppy. I don't want you to just, mark whatever, make some diagram in the bubble sheet. Absolutely not. We're not going to do this. This is what we need to do. You and I are partners in this. Let's do a really good job. And I'm going to provide you with a good environment to do it. If on that day they woke up and it was just like, this is not a good day to do this, they didn't sleep well, they weren't feeling well, something like that, we would not do it. We would put it off. So I got to choose when we would do the standardized tests. But when the results came in, it would be typically maybe weeks later, maybe a month or two later, and my kids completely forgot about it. There might have been a time or two where one of my kids asked, but you know what? I never told them the results of how they did. And the funny thing is, when I would get those results in, I would look over them. And guess what? Because I was involved in their education, I knew exactly how they would do in each of the sections. It was not hard for me to figure that out because I was involved in the day in and day out. I knew how they would do in the various math sections and the language arts sections. And it was no surprise to me. So that was confirming to me. And I hope that if you are in a state that you have to do the standardized testing, that it confirms to you that you know your child and you know them well. And so if you are in a state where you don't have to do it and you are involved in their home education, I guarantee you, you do not need to do standardized testing to prove what you already know. So how do you decide whether you're going to do testing such as, well, let's go back to our original definition of subject tests, or whether to give grades? Use your vision and your goals to decide if that's good for you and your family. And it's okay to change your mind. You might start off maybe in the beginning of homeschooling, like, I have to do these tests because I don't know how they're going to do. And it's okay if after 6 months or maybe 6 years, you decide, you know what, I think I know my kids pretty well. I don't think we need to do this anymore. It's okay to change your mind. It's also okay to do things differently than the school system, and it's okay to do things differently than your other homeschool friends. But I want you to ask yourself a question. And that question is, how will giving tests and giving grades affect my child's education? And how will it affect their view of education? And so even look at each child individually. Going back to my daughter, giving her tests and then giving her grades for that, or even giving her grades for maybe her writing a paragraph, it really broke her heart. It broke her spirit. It helped her not to love education. So I want you to think about that. Think about each child. You might have a child that really is competitive against themselves, and you might say, all right, we'll give them some grades, let them see that kind of thing. But then watch for that competitive spirit. Is it just a desire to get a better grade, or has their view of education been warped in such a way that they have to meet a certain standard and they move on to the next one, which is basically the school system? And instead of just being like, I love to learn. I love to see what has happened in history. I love to build upon my math knowledge. And so it really is giving our kids a better understanding of what education is. Before we close out, there's going to be a last call here soon, but we're getting close to it. 2.5 weeks until ticket sales close for the Little by Little Homeschool Conference. If you have not gotten your ticket, you want to attend, I want to encourage you to get over there and get your ticket soon. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If it was just what you needed to hear, would you do me a favor and share it with a friend? And if you would like to connect more, social media links and more are in the show notes just for you. I promise to see you back here real soon.